Nice to see everybody again. You're all here for your dancing lessons, that's fine. We'll see where we get to. So we've got till, I understand, about 25 past, okay? I'd quite like it if we got a chance for you to ask me questions. I don't quite know how we're going to make that work given the size of the room, but there is a mic here. If I wave, I assume that mic would work. Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, we can probably use this mic later on if people have questions. I'll hurtle around the room. I just think it's important. You've heard me witter on for an hour or so this morning. I've got a few things I want to share with you now, but I think given it's a sort of workshop, I know it's not conducive to working in that way. But if there's questions and things you want to ask, then I'll try and create the space for that as well, if that's okay. I am blinded by the lights a little bit, so I'm just assuming you are out there. So that's. But then again, my kids would say I talk to myself all the time, so don't worry about that. So the session we want to talk about is the idea, the centrality of the voice and influence of children and young people. We've just done quite an interesting set of media conversations over lunch, which is great. So you've got, you've generated a huge amount of media attention over lunch. And one of the questions a couple of them asked is why would you? Why is it important to have the voice and influence of children and young people? And I suppose I'll just put my cards on the table at the start, really. I can't really understand how you would have, and I'll look at this through the lens of the UK, but I think it's applicable to yourselves. You know, the Director of Children's Services, we have a political lead, which is the lead member for Children's Services. We have a piece of legislation called the Children Act. We have a load of guidance around working together to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. The clue's in the title, really, and I find it I just can't comprehend how you would be responsible for arranging and ensuring and providing a whole range of services that are geared towards responding to the needs of children and young people without involving children and young people in the design and the production and the evaluation of those services. So there's a sort of little bit of a, well, why wouldn't you answer to that question, which we didn't say it quite like that in the interview, but that's the general idea. So my position is you can't do this work without engaging in that particular part of the process. The other thing I'd say to you is you will probably be sat with information about practice that you already do yourselves or you're already aware of, where you're doing some outstanding stuff in terms of collecting and responding to the voice and influence of children and young people within your communities. And what I'm not saying to you in any way, shape or form is stop doing all that and do something completely different. So if you're here thinking you're going to get like a panacea from Leeds about this is what you do, there isn't, because there's no right or wrong answer to this. The answer is in a commitment to doing it, to actually engaging. And the only thing I'd ask you to really hold on to is the notion of voice and influence. Voice and influence. One of the hardest messages we got from children and young people in Leeds, which I think I made reference to earlier on this morning, was that they were full of praise for how many times we asked them stuff. In fact, they were sick of being asked on some of the things, but their biggest gripe was you never do anything with it. You don't even come back and tell us what you've done with it. Our voice has no influence. And their strong message was, look, this is our city. This is our city. We want to be part of our city. We want to be part of the growth of our city. And, we get that we can't have everything we ask for, but we just want you to tell us why we can't, or what the reasoning is, or what the thinking is. So, for example, as an extension now, we have a significant group of children and young people from across the city, from all parts of the city, who are actively engaged in the budget discussions that we have. Which are a great joy, as I'm sure you appreciate. And in the UK, we're going through the austerity measures. The budget figures have gone down. We've gone from 135 million net budget just in the bit that I manage. There's a whole load of money elsewhere in different services. I don't manage all the services to do with children's services in Leeds, but I have influence and coordination responsibilities and accountability across those services. The bits I do manage, the net budget has gone from 135 million down to 127 million, down to 124 million. We're now down at 120 million because the money from national government has gone down. By taking this approach and taking the city-wide approach to increasing our strategic influence around the idea of Leeds being a child-friendly city and the centrality of children and children's voice in terms of helping us produce that or design that or make that happen, the strategic influence has actually gone up. So the money's gone down, but the level of influence has done that. And we've actually got more capacity now than we've ever had. Now, I don't say that too loudly in front of the finance director or in front of government officials when I'm asking for money, because I'd like the money as well. What could we do if we had both? But it's interesting that it's not just all about money and resources in that sense. It's about, are you spending what you've already got wisely? And we've got a lot of support and challenge in from children and young people themselves who are helping us work our way through those discussions. So, a couple of things by recap. I got sent this picture. Isn't this just a fantastic picture of the unborn child? Look at the thumb. Look at the thumb. Isn't that brilliant? One of my favourite pictures. And it's just how those things, people took the time to send me that picture, because this is important about the message about Leeds as a child-friendly city. You know what that's about. I talked about it this morning, and I'd urge you just to keep going back to that question, what's it like to be a child or young person growing up in Leeds today? And surprise, surprise, who's the best person, who are the best people to tell you that? Children and young people themselves have a very clear view of what it's like. What's good, what's bad, what's safe, what's not safe, what's working well in the city, what's not working well in the city. And all I'm going to do in this session is just take you through some ideas. But please, 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 just locate it in your own thoughts about all the stuff that's going on now. And if you do one thing after this workshop, just commit to going away and trying to write down and collate all the different initiatives, project opportunities that you have to get the voice and influence of children and young people in the work that you're currently doing. Get together with a small group of people in your office, across your local partnership. You'll be amazed at how much opportunity there is in there. And then what I'm asking you to do is just take what you're already doing and just elevate it, give it a different status, so that you shouldn't be doing anything without seeking and then responding to the voice and influence of children and young people. If you're offering indirect casework management, interventions with one child or with one family, anything you do, you should be seeking feedback. And it's feedback not to monitor performance, and we don't try and use the word performance, but it's about observations and a critique of your practice. And if you're going to develop professionally, the people you're providing your services to, who are benefiting from your practice, should have the right to respond back to you about how it was for them, what it felt like, what worked, what didn't work, what they'd like you to do in the future. And that whole idea of a restorative approach, I'd urge you to think about that, this idea of trying to challenge yourself professionally to make sure that you're always doing things with people. High support, high challenge. Not doing things to families, not doing things for families, not doing nothing at all, which is the worst of all those scenarios. And if you've probably heard this before, if you want to think about it in any way at all, think about how when something might go wrong in your family, when something might go wrong in terms of what's happening with your children, or children somewhere within your family network, how would you want to be treated? How would you want? You would expect to have a voice. You'd expect your children to have a voice. You'd expect that voice to have an influence. So that's what we're talking about in terms of what's it like to be a child or young person growing up in Leeds today, and then how do we make it better. This idea of Leeds as a child-friendly city, which we talked about this morning. You've all got copies of the plan on a page. And I've mentioned to you it's only really been tweaked a couple of times, but this was part of a consultation with children and young people as well. It wasn't just here's the plan, off we go. It was a whole set of what-if conversations. What if, what if, what if. Our biggest bit of paranoia at the start was, well, what if young people don't like being part of a child-friendly city? What if they don't like it? And then we'd have to call it a child and young people friendly city, and it all got a little bit complicated in our minds. Having the conversation with children and young people across the city, both in school settings, in children's centres, in local communities, about what if, what do you think of this idea? And we did steal the idea. We stole the idea from UNICEF. It's a UNICEF model of child-friendly cities. What you find about the UNICEF model, though, is it's not a whole city model anywhere in the world. It's a project initiative, really. And UNICEF have worked with us on what we've done in Leeds, and would accept that. So in the third world countries, you'll find things like access to sanitation, clean water, education. That's the project push under a child-friendly city. In the UK, London probably did more than anybody else on child-friendly cities until we started to look at this in Leeds, and they did a huge amount of investment in play for children, and free transport for under 16s on public transport. Great initiatives, but focused, narrow initiatives have a massive impact, but they're not the whole approach of the centrality of children on that basis. When we spoke to young people, they said, no, we're not worried about that. We're not worried about that because our thinking is, if you get it right for the little kids, you're going to get it right for us. Because a child-friendly city is a young people-friendly city, is a family-friendly city, is a business-friendly city, is a community-friendly city, etc., etc., etc. And actually, we've now got initiatives in Leeds around dementia-friendly, around age-friendly, and it extends across generations, because the principle behind friendly is the centrality of people to the way a city operates, and people having a voice, and that voice having an influence. I won't go through all this plan again. If anyone's got any questions and they want to talk to us about that, but having a clear narrative, having an architecture that sort of holds the whole thing together is critical. You'll know your areas. You have to have some sort of shape that helps you communicate across those areas, and different ways of responding. But all I'd urge you to do is don't overcomplicate it. Don't wait for perfection. Don't try and make it absolutely perfect before you press the go button. Just start somewhere, because it will lead you everywhere else. And start some of those conversations in your local networks and your local communities. And the reason we went for that model is, if we believe in connections, conversations and relationships, which I talked to you about earlier on this morning, it's very hard to build those connections, conversations and relationships with children and young people and their families if you hold everything centrally. If you hold it centrally, it's very hard for organisations to actually genuinely, what they tend to do is have a little bus trip out into a community, take some views and then rush back again. Well, what we're talking about is actually embedding those relationships within those local communities. And that's where it will be different in different communities at different times. So I'd urge you to think about that. And this idea of Leeds as a child-friendly city, that's the original symbol we used when we had the what-if conversations, which is the lift from the UNICEF model. I said sort of glibly at the beginning, well, if you want to know the voice and influence of children and young people, just ask them. Well, in the big conversation that we had around the city about what if, there was no prescription, and we set it in a set of conversations in traditional fora, so things like schools, primary schools, secondary schools, special schools, and youth clubs, the sort of usual places to go, but then using the voice and influence of children themselves and young people themselves, where else do you go? Where else do you go? And can you build sort of young ambassadors who will take some of those conversations and lead some of those conversations into areas that perhaps we as adults can't get to? But the deal is the information gets fed back. And they came up with, interestingly, they came up with 12 things that they wanted a child-friendly city to be, what these 12 things, what they meant to children and young people, and things that were of importance to them. And we've sort of stuck with these 12 just as themes that start to run through and challenge the 5 outcomes, the priorities we set ourselves, the obsessions, the way that we work. And there's an ongoing dialogue with children and young people, and we keep returning back to these things. You might want to think about that. You might want to think about just having a set of conversations with children and young people in a variety of different settings, and seeing if you can crystallise some of those themes that you can bring together in a constructive way. I suppose what I should also say at the beginning is, you don't need a massive resource for this. You don't need, it's tempting to put an industry behind this and start to have a really, massive you need some resource, you need some enthusiastic people who are just going to hold it all together and make sure things happen and that when we say we've received some feedback from children and young people, that we actually do something with it. You've got to have that. So we've got a wonderful team, and in a way I'm a little bit of a fraud, because if I could have shoved them in my baggage and brought them with me, and Hannah and the team, there's only about 2 or 3 of them now, they help coordinate all this. That's their life's work, is helping us get better at talking to, listening to and responding to children. But you don't need a great big thumping department or a great big amount of money to make this happen. You will be leading the charge on a whole set of interactions, and acceptance of the principle that we're not going to do anything without hearing the voice, and that voice having an influence, is just puts a marker down for this is just how we do things around here. It's an expectation. And then you just invest in the workforce development side of that, and your workforce will become more and more skilled in seeking that information. So these were the 12 wishes that we got from children and young people. Child-Friendly Leeds was actually launched by the Queen, can you believe? We managed to coincide with her diary and the city's diary to launch the whole thing, and children and young people were involved in the planning of this. And my only regret of the whole thing, because the city, there's a real buzz around the city, but my only regret is I never got her to put a thumb up. And we tried putting kids in front of her and doing all this, but she's so professional on these things. It's amazing. The other thing is she agreed to sign what we've got, this Child-Friendly Leeds book that we thought we better have because the Queen's coming, and then just get her to sign something that kick-started the whole thing, and it gave a lot of media attention to the launch of Child-Friendly Leeds. So it was a moment, and we took that moment. You may come across moments as well. And children and young people helped us organise a whole series of events that was going on in the city. But the wonderful thing, bear with me, the funny side of this was when they came, they were in an old building called City Varieties, which is a historic music hall, which is where the Queen sort of welcomed and launched Child-Friendly Leeds. Then she came down the lift and sat in a sort of old cobbled courtyard and sat at a table to sign the book. I thought, this is great, but the table just wouldn't stop wobbling. So this table's wobbling away. I've got the world's media there trying to take these pictures of the Queen. Prince Philip is there going, swearing under his breath, saying this table here isn't. So there's a wonderful picture that you can't see me on, but when she's signing the book, I'm lying on the floor on the cobbled ground, holding the table leg, so that the Queen can sign this book. And I know quite a lot about the Queen's ankles now. So over a beer later on, I might tell you. But anyway, but just symbolically using moments to bring people together to have those conversations, and you'll have those things happening in your communities as well. You saw on the picture, the film clip early on, we do have a children's mayor. Now this could be tokenistic, but in the conversation with children, they absolutely want to understand the democratic process. They want to understand how the grown-ups run the city, and they want stuff. This was the feedback we got. They want stuff that mirrors the grown-ups world, if I can use that language without it being patronising. So we've tried, on the formal response to the voice and influence of children and young people, we've tried to mirror the same sort of structures as the adult world. So the children's mayor is a post promoted and nominated through the Lord Mayor of Leeds. There's a voting system that goes through, and we've seen the number of kids engaging in this. They put forward manifestos, they get nominated, they get voted, they go to full council and read out their manifesto for what they would do if they were the children's mayor, and there's some fantastic manifestos that come forward. And there's like a groundswell of committees and groups that sit behind that, and that's the formal structure of voice and influence. But we've also got a massively, insanely complicated network because it's loose and chaotic, not because we've made it overcomplicated. You just have to respond to what's out there, of informal networks and spontaneous consultation and opportunities for children to talk to us in ways that they see are the right things. You know, they're big fans of social media, they're big fans of apps, they're big fans of stuff that it takes me ages to work out how to use. But if you can get into those conversations, people want to respond to you in lots and lots of different ways, and you've got to be open to that. The formal, traditional, boring, adult UK response of, we'll send a questionnaire out, those days are long gone. Those days are long gone. They want instant consultation, they want instant communication, they want to tell you straight away what they're thinking and how responsive. And that's a bit of a challenge for us certainly for me, but in the adult world, of trying to be flexible and responsive enough to those different ways. And actually, I get asked a lot of times, well, what about hard to reach? That's how you get to the hard to reach, different ways of thinking about what happens. We had, I sort of touched on it this morning, or alluded to it this morning. When we started in Leeds, there were lots of things that we just didn't know. So when I asked the simple question about how many care leavers do we have, how many kids have been looked after by the state and have left the state's care and gone on into adulthood? How many? We didn't know. We didn't know. So never mind where are they and how well are they doing and are they engaged in something and are they safe, are they healthy, etc. We just didn't know how many we had. So we set about a huge amount of work in consultation with care leavers themselves about what's it like to be a care leaver. What happens? How do you want to stay connected? So we know exactly how many we've got. We know exactly where they are. We know exactly the type of accommodation they're in. We know exactly what some of their support networks are. We know exactly the opportunities that we can support them with in terms of their offers into work, etc., etc., etc. But you know what? When we were feeling quite good about ourselves, when we had another conversation with that group of young people, and we were thinking about, they're going to want us to. They're going to want us to do a bit more work on the quality of accommodation, the quality of the job offers, the quality of the training offers. Do you know the one thing that they came back to us with that was the most important thing to them? They were lonely. They were lonely. They were not connected. They had all this stuff, things happened to them. They were quite happy with the accommodation. They were quite happy with the potential job opportunities, the learning opportunities that they had. But they were lonely. They'd grown up in state care. They'd grown up in stranger care predominantly, and then they'd gone on and they were not as connected as they wanted to be. So we put a huge amount of effort into trying to understand what that connectedness would mean and how we would never have known that. We would never have known that. We'd have been quite happy with the level of service we'd been providing. We'd have been feeling quite good about ourselves. We knew how many we had. We knew where they were. They're all plugged into something in our minds that made sense. We'd never have known they were lonely. We'd never have known. Just gives you a flavour of the sort of thing that can come back to you if you invest in this type of work with a serious intent for it to have influence. Serious intent for it to have influence. So, if I press this button, there might be a film. If I press this button and there isn't a film, the tech team are going to come and save me. But I think this one's going to work. I think this one's going to work. It might be the next one we have to do something about. This is what happened when we put a bunch of primary school children together with a poet, together with an animator, together with a filmmaker, and asked them to tell us what a child-friendly city meant to them. He says,
I wake up every morning wishing for a sunny day, and I open my curtains hoping there's someone out to play.
I wash my face and brush my teeth and I start my 5 a day. I look beyond my city's horizon and I wish to go everywhere.
The wheels on the bus go round and gets me safely there. My friends could come and we could go and hope we'll meet some new friends there.
I like my school because it's cool. I get to learn and play. And after school, I like to go to the park and hope it's cleaner there. I wish that drivers would care for me more. I would like to ride my bike everywhere and walk through the streets in my town without getting worried about all the cars around.
I dream there is a giant trampoline and a hammock in the sky, so I could rock my dreams into life and make a lead that keeps a child in mind.
I want to be a ballerina and dance at the arena.
Become a footballer, bring us to the top of the league. Play rugby, make music, be all I can be. This is my home, my future depends on it.
In my dreams it might sound off the wall, but I am a child and I have big ideas, wishes and dreams for my future and all. I want a city that will fulfill my hope.
Leeds is beautiful and Leeds is kind. time. Look the other way, there are vulnerable kids, unhealthy lifestyles, businesses big and small. Help us please, involve yourselves, create more opportunities.
A child-friendly lease should mean no more inequality.
I love my city, I love my home, I love how the tall buildings protect me from the cold. I love how the lights light up at night and change colours like the arena walls.
I wish and hope that my future will hold us. As time will change and I will grow, the bigger I grow, I'm filled with hope that I will work to build a home.
Together we'll grow, alone we'll fall. The present needs you, the future depends on us. So let's come together and play.
Okay, so the message there is you don't have to use the traditional fora for getting views. You just put people in arts, culture, lots of different ways. And there will be, because of the Child Friendly Leeds umbrella, and you've got the Every Child Succeeds umbrella, I would argue, you get other businesses, creative partners, people come together with different ideas of how to engage and seek out the voice and influence of children and young people. Really powerful, that film, when we were engaging with some of the big businesses as they were thinking about coming into the city. Important to have that voice and influence there as well. This is just some of the formal networks that have emerged. I don't even begin to understand how Facebook works properly, or Instagram, or any of that stuff. I'm a little bit okay on Twitter, but not quite as nimble as I'd like to be. Just getting into those different routes, those different ways of making sure young people have a voice and that voice has influence. Now, this is a bit of a busy map, but basically this is what happened when we just said, well, what's currently going on? What's currently going on? It was amazing just how much was already happening, but it was happening in isolation. It wasn't connected to everything else. So that's why we were struggling with the influence bit, because it didn't have a route to express its voice and for that voice to have influence and then things to bring about change. And it's just worth you sitting down with a pen and paper and a group of children and young people, different groups of children and young people, and just working out what's currently out there already. This map sort of evolves and changes all the time as some groups disappear, other groups appear, and we're probably, hand on heart, we've probably not caught everything either, but we've got enough to mobilise collective effort to make sure that if we're thinking about talking to children and young people, it's not just the usual suspects, it's not just our favourite group, it's actually a whole network of activity that you want to engage in. You might want to think about what your map looks like across the area. Here's a bunch of primary kids who come in on a regular basis. We'll bring as many people as possible, different parts of the city, to come and have a conversation with us about child-friendly Leeds and what it means, what's working, what's not working, where do we go next. This is how we used to work. This is how we work now. If you look at the way things, it was quite a rigid, traditional youth council model. Just as one example for you, it's now open. There's free membership. Anybody can come along. It's a mobile membership. That opens up a whole set of different opportunities. Word of mouth means people can start to gather. We've had to change the venues we use on a number of occasions because they're just not big enough now to get the number of people who want to come in and engage in that process. So that's been really important to us as well. Whole network of communication strands, different ways of talking to each other as things have continued to grow and grow and grow, so that we're pretty confident that we've got a good enough access to as wide a range as possible, but we're never happy. We're never happy, and that's where the individual connections, individual casework, individual projects, individual work with particularly those kids who are in some of the most vulnerable situations, the kids who are arrested by the police, who spend the night in the police cells overnight, the kids who with disabilities, with special education needs, where the communication techniques have to be a little bit more flexible and responsive, and it's easy to forget those groups because it's harder. Well, actually, you need to put the shift in to make sure that you are getting the voice and influence of those children as well. We have something called nationally there's something called Takeover Day. So the Children's Commissioner in the UK runs something called Takeover Day, and it's supposed to be one day where kids take over my job, take over running the newspaper, It's a brilliant day. Feedback we got from kids was we want to do more of that, so we have a takeover month, and the whole month where kids just take over loads and loads of different things, and the stories are phenomenal. And it doesn't mean you've got children that are taking difficult child protection decisions about cases, etc., but they're in amongst the work environment, the type of work you do. They take over Leeds Rhinos training sessions, they take over the local paper. It led to the local paper in Leeds, as a Child Friendly Leeds ambassador, giving over 2 pages a month to children forever. So every month there'll be 2 pages where young reporters go in, they're coached and mentored by reporters at the paper, and they've got free editorial reign in terms of what they report on and how they report it. All started from children and young people saying, why has the media got such a downer on kids? Why has the media got such a downer on kids? The editor was a bit taken aback by that, and this was part of doing something about it, but they're learning things as well. We've got young reporters who help us when we had the Tour de France in Leeds, we had the start of the Tour de France, we've had Sports Personality of the Year in Leeds, we've had the Tour de Yorkshire, we've had some major rugby international events held and hosted in Leeds. We had some big music awards in Leeds recently. We've got a small army of young reporters who've been coached and trained, and they go and they do films and they interview the stars as they're arriving, etc. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sir Ben Ainslie. So Ben Ainslie, gold medalist in sailing, multi-award-winning gold medalist, Sir Ben Ainslie. So he spends his life sailing, basically. And one of our young reporters went up to him at the Sports Personality of the Year and said, now then, do you like boats? It's a great question. So he spends his life in boats, but he was in absolute hysterics for ages. But that, just giving kids the opportunity to ask questions and take over those things. So you might want to think about takeover days or takeover events. And lots of businesses get involved in that as well. It's not the usual, it's not just government offices. It's across the city with kids taking over the running of their city. Whole set of things here in terms of have a voice. One of the spin-offs is we've now got interest from national TV, from other organisations who want to hold their events in Leeds because of the centrality of children and young people in the way that the city runs. So CBBC, the BBC Children's Channel, started to do outside broadcasts. They wanted it to be broadcast from Leeds because of Child Friendly Leeds. Just a spin-off from that is the millions of people that came into the city, what it did for the economy, etc., all because of the centrality of children, which is worth you thinking about. We have annual Child Friendly Leeds Awards every year. Now, these are incredible events. So we have a theatre that we're given the theatre free. It's part of their contribution to Child Friendly Leeds. But here's the thing. It's not awards where we, as adults, orchestrate the awards ceremony. The entire awards ceremony is given over to a fairly large group of children and young people themselves. They book the acts. They work through the nominations and do the awards things. They do the front of house. They do the back of house. They get the running order together, they write their own scripts. Now they have adults who help them, and particularly people who are experts in how you run the front of house of a theatre, how you run a theatre on the night, how you run the backstage part of the theatre. We turn up, we've got absolutely no idea what's going to happen, because it's their awards. But now we could have done a traditional awards ceremony and just done it as an adult to say thank you to kids, but the kids take it over and it's their show, and it's just gone from strength to strength year on year. You've seen some of the photographs this morning. Anywhere leads to everywhere. Just the whole idea now of the city taking those photo opportunities. We did have the brand. It's quite interesting about the brand as well. In consultation with children and young people about the brand, we didn't have a thumb to start with. That came from them. And it was this idea of the universal sign of acceptance of OK that they wanted to see. And what they also, I used to talk about child-friendly city. The feedback from children and young people was we want child-friendly Leeds. We want child-friendly Leeds because it was about identity. and something that they want to get hold of. So that whole idea. Once you've got the branding, make sure people use it. And you're not saying to everybody, stop doing what you're doing, do this. You're saying, think about what you're doing, how it aligns itself to the plan. So how would it align itself to Every Child Succeeds and the 6 outcomes that you've got? And just use your brand. Just brand it up in a different way. We've got a major supermarket chain, just as an example, when they were talking to children and young people, and they worked out that there was significant delay in our placement, our ability to place children with kinship carers, because the homes needed tidying up and they needed decorating and stuff needed to happen to make it fit for an extra bedroom or whatever for that young person to go and stay there. That big supermarket chain then said, well, look, we do a corporate social responsibility programme anyway, and we do volunteer decorating. All we need to do is just make sure that our volunteer decorators target those houses and those kinship carers' homes as a priority. And that's helped us move faster through the placement, identification and placement of children into kinship care. They're not doing anything they weren't doing before, but actually the feedback is they now feel they're doing something much more positive, part of a bigger thing called Child Friendly Leeds, and they've responded directly to the voice of children and young people who were asking them about that. Another example, if you're a looked after child in Leeds, if you're looked after by the state, you have a statutory entitlement to something called an independent visitor. So when you reach the age of 13, you're allowed, if you want one, to say, I would like somebody independent. I don't want another social worker. I don't want somebody who works for the organisation or one of the state agencies. I want somebody who's going to take an interest in me as a person and become my friend, my independent, who's an advocate on my behalf, but has no axe to grind. They've got nothing to do with the state machinery, if I can use that term. We used to have incredible amounts of trouble recruiting enough people to match them with the children, male or female, different ethnic backgrounds, etc., etc., to become independent visitors. And your only deal as an independent visitor is you stay connected to that young person, you try and build a relationship, you take them out once a week, once a month, twice a week, twice a month, whatever the deal is, but you stick to what you've said. And it can be going to sports clubs, it could be going to theatre, it could go out for a meal. Just doesn't matter. It's an opportunity for somebody independent to befriend. And we had a huge waiting list. On the back of Child Friendly Leeds, on the back of children expressing to the city this was something that they wanted, and they didn't like the idea that they couldn't have access to something they were entitled to because we couldn't find the independent visitors, we now no longer have a waiting list. Because businesses, local partners, people under that umbrella of a child-friendly city said, we can do that, we can do that. We can make that happen. It's just an easy thing for us to do. We didn't even know it was a problem. And now we've heard how important it is to children and young people, from children and young people themselves. We can make that happen. We don't have a waiting list now. We don't have a waiting list now. So there's loads of things that can happen in your communities. It's just easier, and some of this stuff you'll be doing anyway, it's just easier if you've got that collective will against that common endeavour. So if you take your Every Child Succeeds, take your 6 outcomes, there's things that can happen under that umbrella that perhaps would have been harder to mobilise, but not impossible previously. Okay? This idea of dressing the city, what happens with this is if kids are taking their exams, we know it's a tough time, so we dress the city to say, good luck in your exams. When you've done your exams and there's the big relief, we dress the city again saying, well done in your exams. It's just a simple way of saying we care. We care about the pain you're about to go through, and we say thank you for what you've done in terms of achieving in your exams, because it's part of your contribution and us being interested in your contribution to your city. And again, that was negotiated with children and young people as something they'd quite like to not feel on their own while they were doing this stuff. Okay? I showed you the film, my favourite picture this morning. When people start doing stuff without you even asking them, I think Liz referred to this as well this morning, then that's when you know something's happened and it's gone a little bit deeper than just a few nice words. We've done a lot on play now as a consequence, a lot of small grants, a lot of businesses wanting to get involved in more play infrastructure, because the feedback from kids was that particularly the town centre was a big kids city. It's for big people. It wasn't for little people. There's not a lot to climb on, jump on, touch, mess about with as you go around town. So we've done quite a bit as a response to that. A lot of stuff going on in schools. We've now got we're trying to respond to the humanitarian crisis that we're all facing, but particularly in the UK, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, refugee families. If we are a child-friendly city, we should be welcoming around that. Children and young people have helped us with that. And the donation of soft toys has been the biggest thing. And the biggest load of feedback we've had from the kids who arrive in Leeds is it's the soft toys that are the most important to them. It's a thing that they can hold on to. But kids handing and welcoming other kids into the city and designing the welcome packs and putting those packs together was really important. This is part of our budget meetings I talked about earlier on. The other principle within children's services is nobody will be appointed to a post in children's services across the partnership in Leeds without children and young people having some voice and some influence over that appointment. So in my job, I would get interviewed by a whole raft of children and young people. In some of the others, it might not be as formal as that, but there will be some mechanism where children and young people are engaged in that appointment process, and that's now mapping out across different agencies across the city as well. And these are just things where we're looking at, I won't go through all these given the time that we're on at the moment, but these are things there where businesses are now feeding back to us, big businesses, the benefits they've felt from being part of Child Friendly Leeds and how it's helped their organisations grow and their organisations develop on top of that. So why would a John Lewis, why would Burberry, why would Yorkshire Bank, why would British Gas, why are you going to get involved in this stuff? Lots and lots of feedback now that it's massively important to them. And the penny that dropped, I suppose, was they're all big employers. And it's not just the big employers, it's small employers as well, but take the big employers. And therefore, just on basic stats, they're going to have members of their workforce who have caring responsibilities. They're going to have members of their workforce who are foster carers, who are kinship carers, people who have children with disabilities, children with special needs, children who are involved with child protection services. So why wouldn't they, as a good employer, want to be involved in this idea of a child-friendly city? So we've got things like kinship-friendly employment policies, foster-friendly employment policies, where people, the employer, is a bit more welcoming and a bit more understanding about the needs of their workforce if they are contributing to this idea of Leeds as a child-friendly city. Okay, let's go through all those. I won't give you there some of the businesses, some of those. I won't go on to all those again. We do have an attempt at trying to produce a scorecard in the same way so it can go back up to the top table, just to give us an idea of volume, reach, themes, ideas. We have a Children and Young People's Safeguarding Board run by children and young people as well, that mirrors the Adult Safeguarding Children's Board. We have a group of young people who report into the Children's Trust Board, that top table. So that principle applies to children and young people's voice and influence as much as it does to ourselves. I'm going to stop there because I'm conscious of the time. And then, if we've got time, I've got one more film to show you. But I'm conscious, are we roughly about done? Is it nowish? Have you got any questions, gang? You've probably got hundreds, but or do you want to see one more film? One more film. Can we do some technical wizardry? We couldn't quite get it to work as I wanted it to, because I'm hopeless. But the technical wizard here will help us. If I come out of that, it was that one there, unless we've got it, because I had to move it again.
If you go over that one. That's another writer?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this film is about 3 minutes long. We were making a film for something else when I was Director of Children's Services in Hull. And we had some spare film with a film crew, and we gave it to a bunch of kids from a secondary school and said, just go and make a film. Just go and make a film about connections and relationships. So this is a 3-minute film about connections and relationships that they put together themselves. And the thing you'll notice is there's very little talking in the entire film, but it's one of my favourite films. It's called Flowers, and am I pressing something? So the idea of this is flowers, and you'll see what the young people do with the flowers. So by the end of today, you'll be half-naked people dancing with flowers. Okay, connections and relationships. You're the ones with the flowers. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks.